G'day everyone and welcome again to another exciting episode of the Hurt Box. Still sort of blown away by the fact that we continue to pump out these interviews and we've got a longer list than we imagined of people to interview. No other important ones than tonight. And a quick introduction to Boyd Conrick, or Battler as everyone knows him. And we'll probably get into where you got that nickname, mate, because I don't actually know. So welcome to the show, mate, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to the next 40 minutes, hour, whatever we've got. Yeah,
42 minutes.
I'm a time man, so I'm on the clock. I'm ready to go.
Well done, mate, and thanks for joining us. And yeah, appreciate the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with you, mate. Nice one.
Yeah,
good stuff. Look, and just start with a quick intro. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, and I'd be very surprised if there's no one in the Newcastle and Hunter region, even broader, who doesn't know Boyd. Boyd's been a bit of an icon of the sports of triathlon and surf club. I'm going to throw it out there, Battler, to say about 35 years. Is that right?
I'm 47 now. Yeah, although I was no child superstar by any means. So, no, really, I probably not quite that long, but getting up there, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to age you, mate, but you're looking pretty good for 47, by the way. But look, I'm super excited about tonight. Boyd, when I first got into triathlon, 1995, Boyd was, beginning to be the man. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, certainly did some amazing things, and I'm so keen to get into those. Some real old school stuff, and has raced some amazing races against some amazing people and done some awesome things. Probably the most important point I'd make, though, is how good a bloke this bloke is. He's a champion off the track as well. Loves a beer. Plenty of good social events over the years, and the other thing is that you've put a lot back into the sport, and we'll get into that as we go on, mate. But what we usually like to do, mate, we usually like to start with how you got into the sport to start with.
Yeah, well, I was a normal sort of kid, as most young guys. I still live in Redhead now, and I did back when I was a kid growing up, did the normal stuff, football and surfing. Stand-up, surfing was probably my main sport. And dabbled in cross-country running, but never really seriously. I was reasonably good at it, but didn't sort of get any coaching per se or stuff while I was at school. As I got older, I was in a lot of surf comps, and when you're young, and there was a lot of good surfers in Newcastle. We came from an area where there was a huge amount of good surfers, especially around Merriweather and stuff, and Luke Egan, Nicky Wood. The list goes on. MR, obviously, one of those world top. And as a kid, you dream you're going to be a good surfer. But I won a couple of local comps in the board riders at Redhead. But I was never going to be a star of any, do any better than that. And by the time I was about 15, I think I got some what I thought were bad calls in surf comps. You're under the panel of judges. It's not black and white at all. So I moved into surf life saving. My dad was an administrator in surf life saving, and my parents weren't real sporty. Mum always kept fit running, and my two older brothers were mad surfers, but they weren't overly competitive. I was competitive. I've always been super, super competitive. Like whether I play ping pong with the kids or whatever.
Smash them.
Yeah. So got into surf life saving at 15 and did my first ever swim session. Actually, a guy well known in endurance sports in Newcastle, Stewie Adams, he was, Stewie be 5 or 6 years older than me. He was mates with my older brothers, actually.
I think he's 85, actually, this year.
Yeah, well, he got into surf Ironman because Stewie was a bit of a rat bag as a kid and got older and, stayed out of trouble a bit more and started doing triathlons and surf life saving. And he dragged me along to do some swim sessions with a group of triathletes over at West Walls End Swim Centre one winter. And guys like, actually in that squad were guys like Johnny Clifford, God rest his soul, Chris Johnson, who was a good triathlete back then. who else was in that squad? There was a couple of guys that were into their Ironman stuff, and Stewie started Ironman triathlon stuff.
Yep.
And Stewie Allen, it was always started up, Laurie Allen, his wife. Anyway, I was a lot younger than them, but I started doing a bit of that, and that was great. And I also, at the same time, I always had known him, but was better introduced to Nathan Stewart, who you interviewed a few weeks ago, the struggler. He's a great mate of mine. His grandfather, Goldie, who was a coach, just a voluntary coach, and helped a lot of young surf lifesavers come up through the ranks. And he was a real positive person, and I gelled with him really quickly. And I started paddling boards in the surf club. Started doing surf Ironman events too. But one thing I found, trying to start it at 15, I was okay on the board. I was reasonably competitive. I had a lot of good kids in my age group, though, back then, that were winning. They were hunter-based athletes, but they were winning Australian titles. Guys like Nat McGregor and Ty Dowker and a few others. And Matty Reese was going around, and there was, a few years older than Guy Andrews. We had a wealth of talent in the Newcastle branch with Surf Ironman. So it's a pretty specialist sport. And although I really tried hard, and I just wasn't a good enough swimmer. Like, starting at 15, these kids had been swimming since they were 5, 6, 7, whatever. But Goldie was Nathan's grandfather. His real name's Peter McKerris. They called him Goldie or Goldfinger, and he was always a source of encouragement. And he was always, you'd be coming out of the water in the swim leg fairway behind, and be, come on, you're in this, and that's actually where I think I got my nickname Battler years ago. He'd be like Battling Boyd Conrick, and so I was keen though, but I learned how to lose. I really learned how to. I wasn't terrible, but surf life saving, it might only be 8 kids in the under 17 or under 19 Ironman at the Hunter branch, and they're all pretty good athletes. But I was at the back of the field, and probably it was a blessing in disguise, because I really learned how to, struggle along. And a mate of mine joined at the same time, Peter Scott, and he got into ski paddling and kayaking. We went to school together here in Whitebridge High School, and he went on with it. He was a really good ski paddler. He was a pretty big, strong guy, where what I'll say later is I think I was built to do probably triathlons rather than surf life-saving events. Lean, skinny sort of kid. But no, the surf life-saving events really helped me, do that multidiscipline sport that I ended up doing seriously and being pretty good at. But yeah, fast forward from that, I linked up with a guy here, Drew Blatchford, that was really good, and his brother Troy. Their dad Ross coached us a bit too, and moved up to the Gold Coast after I finished high school, still wanting to be part of this surf life saving thing, because back then, you'd remember it, the Uncle Toby's Surf Ironman was a massive thing, and it was great. It was on TV in summer on a Sunday afternoon, and you'd get around the TV with your mates having a beer or whatever, and and some of my heroes I wanted to be part of that. And I did maybe 2 trial events to get into that. But again, my swim leg just wasn't good enough. It was, I was a reasonably good runner compared to a lot of the surf Ironmen. I used to run well on the soft sand, and I don't know why. I always loved running on the beach and on the soft sand. But my water legs just weren't good enough, and I never looked like getting in that series, to be honest. And then in 95, I did the Coolangatta Gold. I trained really hard for that, and it had a lot of long run legs in it. First year, I think it was back on for years since Guy Leach had won it in the 80s, and got into it. And I got sick the week before it. And it was funny because I was really fit, and went to the Gold Coast, and it was terrible conditions. The wind was as strong as it got, and I kept cutting the field. Anyway, bottom line was I finished, and I nearly walked the run leg,
Wow.
But I was the last one that they allowed to finish. And it was a little bit demoralising, actually. I was pretty bummed. But at the same time, when I look back on it, especially in the few years after that, when I started doing tries, that was the best thing I ever did, was finish that race. And remembered just how hard it was. Yeah. So anyway, that was in October 95. So I came back from that thinking, oh, geez, what am I going to do? I was sort of working as a lifeguard, doing a little bit of uni on the side, and I was a little bit bummed, yeah. So somebody suggested a month or two later, because I was pretty fit from all that training for that race, said I have a crack at the Morpeth Triathlon. So Maitland, up at Maitland Way, and it's been going for years. Great event. And years later, I ended up winning a few of them. But I did that event on a borrowed bike. And what surprised me was I come out of the swim maybe first or up the front, got on the borrowed bike.
Always been up the front of the swim, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, completely different sports, Paul. Like Anyway.
Is that in the river up there? It's in the Morpeth River?
Under the bridge.
Really? The swim's in the river?
It's the Hunter River, isn't it, at Morpeth?
It's the Hunter River. And there's been a couple of famous episodes of flooding. One year we started with a dead cow on the other side of the bank. Beautiful.
That just adds to the
flavour.
Hasn't affected us.
Anyway, I did that race and I went backwards in the bike, so I might have come out first or second in the swim. Ended up off the bike in, I can't remember, maybe 15th, 20th. Got into the run leg. It was an 8K run leg off a 30K bike. And I remember going, geez, how heavy are my legs, And I made up a few places that might have finished, let's say 15th, somewhere around there. But it twigged my interest, and I then still had a borrowed bike for a while. I started doing a series in Northern Beaches of Sydney called the Maxim Series, and I ended up winning one of those races after about the third race, and I was like, wow. So I improved quickly, and one thing I did find was that my run leg started coming along, and probably my body shape started changing a bit because I was only doing, a lot of leg work and not so much paddling and stuff anymore. And I soon noticed that my biggest strength actually was my ability to run off the bike with heavy legs, which a lot of triathletes, when you guys probably know, when you get off that bike, sometimes it's the lactic acid and how heavy your legs feel are the sort of downfall of a lot of triathletes. So were you training specifically at this stage for tries? Yeah, I started to, not really knowing what I was doing. I was still swimming with the squad, but training by myself a lot. Yeah. Started doing a run session each week with a guy I'd been running with Drew Blatchford, the surf Ironman, a guy called Greg Gordon. We go to Marks Point Oval and really get stuck in. And I did that for years with him once a week. And we did some brutally hard sessions and, Yeah. But so what happened, I got to that stage where, I improved a lot. So that was 96-ish. And, I love to race, so I raced all the time. Like, I don't understand some of these kids coming through now, and not all at all, but you learn so much from racing. I think if I correlate it over to say the NRL or something, which I watch a fair bit of, like you hear them talk about match fitness. You can do all the training in the world, but until you're put under pressure to make decisions and to really, you can never train 100%. I don't care who you are. You can never put in that effort as what you do in the race, in a real life race. So I raced a lot. And I guess I was learning all the time, and they weren't all good races or anything. But by 97, I qualified for the Australian team to go to the Perth Worlds.
Macca one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was still so new to triathlon, and I'd only just got a bike, I think, and my own bike, and probably off the bicycle centre, I think, Simon, where you
used to frequent,
and it was an Avanti, and I was racing in Newcastle at the time against guys like Kyle Hughes and Matt Mansfield. A couple of guys went in. That was short course. A lot of other people were into the long course stuff, like I know guys that were mentors for Nathan, guys like Robbie Walker and Glenn Grudy, Paul Hines, all those guys. They were more long course guys. I think Stewie Adams is probably Jurdy. They're all doing. But there's a few guys. Tim Lang ended up in the Australian team. older guy, Pete Sooner. He's a lovely guy. And
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we went over and racing at the world title. Actually, I walked in because I got to start late in the team. I think I was 11th and they took 10 or something like that. And I got to start late. So I went up, didn't even really have the uniform. I turned up for the team breakfast and walked in, and Rod Sadara was up on the microphone welcoming everyone. And I'm standing there, and this is the funny story because Chris McCormack, who would go on to win that weekend his world title, says to me, "Mate, what are you doing? You know the suit?" It was a breakfast I was like, "Oh, yeah." I'm looking at him thinking, I know this guy. And he said, "Sit down here. Who are you?" And I was like, "Oh, from Newcastle, lifeguard." And
Battler.
Yeah, and from then on, yeah, I gelled really well with him. As it went a few years without, because I was still racing age group, a year or two before I really got to know him well. But yeah, just that day sitting on that table, then 3 days later he won the world. And I'm up a tree at the finish line when he won, and I'm like, but anyway, my race was a 20. I must have just turned 20, 21, and it's 20 to 24-year-olds, and I got 8th in the world.
Wow.
My bike leg let me down. I was up there in the swim, fell back in the bike, ran through the field, got 8th, and
That's
I
cool.
was happy. I was happy with that.
Wow.
And then
Yeah. To not to cut you off, but we're going to run out of time, and there's so many aspects that we want to get to.
Yeah.
You obviously started to show a lot of promise, and triathlon, for those who don't remember, in the 90s was huge in Australia. You know, we had the Tui's Blue Series that then became the St. George Formula One Series. Can you fast forward to, you obviously had a pretty quick rise to prominence. Now, that series was just the who's who of triathlon in the world, and you qualified for that series, and you did a couple of races. So can you tell us about how overwhelming that must have been?
Took me a few years because just after that world title in the age group, I did a race. It was the St. George Tour as well. It was like a feeder into, and we did a race in Canberra. It was swim, bike, run, swim, bike, run, swim, bike, run. I went down. Nathan was racing juniors. Him and I drove down together, and I finished 10th in this, a field of all these people like that. I was like, what? And I remember driving home. I got the check, got in the car. We're heading from Newcastle to get on the piss, and I remember him saying to me, "I can't believe you just got 10th." And I was like, yeah. To me, I was still so new that it was a bit like, yeah. So I started doing that St. George Tour, and I trialled for the St. George Grand Prix maybe twice without success. One race was really poor. One race wasn't too bad, but I missed out. And then in 2002, I went to St Kilda, and they were taking 5 guys from a sprint race through to the series. It was about 22 of us in the series in the end. And I remember I got to St Kilda and I was running well. I'd been on the track. I was running sub 9 minutes for 3Ks by then. And I was like, I had my run going. My swim was going really well. I'd learned to ride a bike more or less. Still wasn't my great strength, you know. It was never going to be. As Macca said years later, work your strengths, Battler, work your strengths. Your bike's never going to be your strength. And I thought, yeah, that's a good point. And that's what I did. And I got into that race knowing that if I could hang in the bike, very few were going to outrun me. I got 4th and I stayed. Because I remember that morning in St Kilda, I was in this shitty little hotel at St Kilda Sunday morning. I remember looking in the mirror and just, that was the one race in my life where I looked at myself and said, today, there's no excuses. Actually, my surfboard hit me in the head during the way. I had these stitches all through me. But I was like, that did not affect me one bit. And I remember saying to myself look in the mirror and go, you'll die in this swim leg. Like the pace is going to be that hard off the start. And I always had this saying to weather the lactate storm, as in, you know, when everything just fills with lactate and you got to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I came out of the water in a good position, up 3rd, 4th maybe. Got on the bike in a pack. It was draft legal. Was swapping turns. And then I got into the run. I was comfortable. I knew and I got 4th. Got into the series. But to be honest, when I got into the series, I was pretty. So there's 22 guys, I think. Yeah, I was pretty poor. My results were down the bottom end of those 22 guys. And although I don't want to look for an excuse, the difficult thing was by this stage I got into the fire brigade, which was a Fire Rescue New South Wales, it's called now, which is a great job, too good a job to give up for the, I'd make a little bit of money out of triathlon, but I was never going to give that job up. So what I'm saying is I was forced to sort of stay in Newcastle and train. I trained a lot by myself. Back then, I think Nathan was back in Queensland. I trained with Shane Gibbs had started doing triathlons. He'd been a surf competitor. Little Pete Morrow, a little scientist. He was started training with me too. But no disrespect to those guys, they were sort of new or younger than me, and you're sort of winning everything at training. But as I said, I had this group of guys I was racing in the Formula One series. Half of them are all in the same group on the Gold Coast and racing each other in training every week. So when I got into those races, it was difficult to perform at what I'd say was a high standard.
So you've made a choice. You've made a choice on your career as a fiery versus maybe a couple of races on the triathlon front, which is fair enough, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you went overseas too, didn't you? Didn't you do some?
Yeah. So I did 6 seasons overseas. The fire brigade allowed me to sort of take time off and go overseas. I raced 3 seasons in America and 4 seasons in France.
Wow.
They were great.
They're back to back?
So what I do, I get 8 to 10 weeks off a year and go to Europe or USA.
Sponsored? Were you sponsored to go over, or were you just on your own?
Yeah, so in France especially, it's a great system. They've got the best system in the world, from juniors through to veterans. They race in the afternoon. The crowds are massive. They, in Australia, unfortunately, with a lot of racing outside the Formula One and stuff, you go to these events and there's 5 seagulls and some people's grandparents, it's on at 6 o'clock in the morning. In France, anything that had a cycle leg in it was just, people adored it. And they shut down towns and cities. They brought out all the wines from the region, the vineyards, all the great food from the region. And you'd have those races. We'd always race at 3 p.m. Yeah. In the morning, they'd have the juniors, they'd have the veterans. And within each race, you had teams. So there was good money for the teams and good money for the individuals on so many different types of courses, like river swims, ocean swims, mountains, flat. It was really good. And the camaraderie and the atmosphere, just the atmosphere. Like, there was thousands of people at some of those races. And
so some good memories there from doing that.
Oh, yeah. And my now wife, Ali, and I took her over a few times, and I'd race so many times when I was over there. Like, I'd get over there and race 10 races over 8 weeks, because you can race midweek over there sometimes in their summer. And I'd get the map out. I'd have a car and a house that the club would give me.
Yeah.
I'd get a map out, the old style, before Google Maps.
Yeah.
All these little races in these towns, and you'd be like getting lost. And
bonjour.
Mate. And my French was pretty ordinary. But I had some experiences trying to get to races, just stressing, going, I think we're going to. Anyway, I had some really good experiences, and I've still got friends to this day from France. I had some good wins over there. And when you're winning over there, it's like there's thousands lying on the finish line. Like, it's not, it really is something to see, yeah. So.
Can I ask, I've got a ripping hailstorm going on above my house, so sorry, I'm trying headphones. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Just some of the names that you race with, Battler, or just some of the iconic people that you've raced with. Rattle off a few names.
Yeah, well, I guess McCormack, Chris, he's one, and I did a lot of time with him, more so in San Diego, training with him, and we did a training camp in Kona one year, and that was an experience. And did a lot of races in the heat that he helped me get to, because he was trying to train for Kona, and I always raced well in the heat, so I do some races in all parts of the world, but always raced alongside, whether it was a lot of tries we used to have back then at Taree and Byron Bay and Grafton and Morpeth and places like that. Guys like Craig Alexander, who was just a product of hard work. Shorto, obviously, in the Ironman. Pete Robinson. I raced Pete a lot, and to see him win 3 world titles was incredible. And then you had, while we were racing, all the girls racing, like people like Emma Carney and McCurley, especially in California, where she lives now. Joe King, all those sorts of people. So, yeah, they're all up and down the coast.
Mate, tell us about a time like you've had some fantastic memories and obviously achieved great success. Tell us some times where it was pretty shit though, when you thought, I'd rather be home, with a beer watching the NRL, or, where you've come off the run or the swim and you're just going, this is just bullshit. Have you had those times, and then how'd you get through them?
I think going into Ironman, and more so in Ironman, I actually wish I didn't get into Ironman too early. I went into it, I think Gibbsy started training me, wanted to do Foster, and it was 04, and he said, it taught me to do an Ironman. And I said, yeah, right, Owen. We're doing a funny little thing where we're doing 2 weeks of long course and 1 week of short course, because I wanted to keep racing short course. And I still did that. And I think even the same year I did Foster, I won the State Open Olympic distance triathlon. But I went under 9 hours in Foster in the first one, which I wanted to do. I went 8:59:45, right? It killed me to do it. But what I will say about Ironman, I had a lot of disappointment in the end with Ironman, because I found that I couldn't race enough. I love to race. And if you had a bad race, you're still stuffed from it for weeks. And I found that I had a bit of a back issue at one stage that was coming from doing Ironman racing. And so I had a fair bit of a few letdowns in and around doing Ironman. And I got a lot of positive feelings out of it and achieved a few good things. But for me, I find that I'm a racer, and Ironman, unfortunately, I was listening to Kevin Kutcher, was it the other week on your show, and he's a full-on endurance man and talks about some of those things you go through in Ironman. Like, at least in a sprint race, Olympic distance race, you can race, you can have a bad one, you can even feel shit. And I've only got 3 Ks to go on the run leg. Come on.
Yeah.
You might only be down 10 seconds. But in an Ironman, you're feeling bad. You're walking or almost walking, and you're bonking, and your nutrition's gone out the window. And so I didn't have a lot of disappointment in and around any short course stuff. I really enjoyed it. But the longer stuff I found harder to deal with, because it didn't satisfy me enough to do as many events. Yeah.
And I'd just say there, I suppose, you had a great long course career, mate, but you were a bloody prolific winner in short course stuff. I mean, even locally, the local derby, Spark Helmore, how many times did you win that?
I think 9, because someone asked me last year, and it was 9, yeah. But it's funny though, you'd win the Spark Helmore, and I'm no disrespect to everyone, because it's great to see people going around. But there's 1,000 people in it, and there's probably, I don't know, 5 serious triathletes.
Yeah.
Then you go, like my best ever result was probably 17th in the world long course titles in 06 in Canberra. It was the hottest field I've ever seen long course, almost. I was the second Aussie home behind Crowe. But what I'm getting at is, it doesn't even rate a mention. Like or Noosa, you go well at Noosa and top 10 or whatever, but you win the local triathlon, people think
you're a legend.
Mate, you're killing it. You're like, yeah, fair enough.
Mate, look, we'll probably move on. You did then move into Ironman, and I'm really interested in what you just said about the Ironman stuff. I was going to ask about particularly Malaysia. It's probably one of the hottest Ironmans in the world, and you had a great result there. Before we just jump into life after triathlon, I think it'd be interesting.
Yep. Ironman?
Yeah,
Malaysia. Yeah, I think I got 6. Yeah, 6. Yeah, it was a pretty tough field actually. I was trying to get a spot in Kona. I went up there, and the field was harder than it normally is. I've come out the water in front with Brian Rhodes and Chris Liardo and Pete Jacobs, and we're away. And then Shorto, and I spent a little bit of time up Lennox a year or 2 later with Shorto doing some training. And mate, I thought I went okay in the heat, but this guy was phenomenal. Like, seriously, his work ethic, he hasn't got a fast bone in his body, but he's just a diesel engine that, honestly, he went, I ran 3 20 in Malaysia, which wasn't bad, but it's 40-degree heat. The run leg, there was no shade in the run, and usually I'd run 3 hours, right? So I lost 20. Shorto treated that race like it was 25 degrees. Nobody else did. Liardo didn't. Jacobs didn't, who went on to win Hawaii. Jacobs got 5th. I was just behind him. But I remember running away from the finish line at the 30K mark with another 10.5K loop to go or whatever. And the smells of all the Malaysians are on the side of the thing with those cooking their goat or chicken or whatever, and the mangy dogs running around. There was no shade. I remember running away from the finish line knowing that I've still got 11 Ks to run, thinking this is torture. And the reason, not so much you're running slowly, you've got to stop at those ice and water stations and actually just make sure you're getting enough in. It was the hardest element of a race I've ever done. I'm in Malaysia. It was torture.
Good stuff, mate. And look, I think I don't just admire you as an athlete, but as a person, and you've done some great stuff after triathlon. And I think that's really commendable.
Before we jump off, just when you're talking about your racing and you went overseas here and there, what sort of money are we talking? Just to give the audience a bit of an understanding that you're probably running on an oily rag and funding all this yourself.
Millions.
Yeah, look, I was funny, I was an athlete that could make a week's wages easily in prize money, but at the same time, I wasn't getting the appearance money, or I might have a couple of times, but very rarely, and or even the airfares and stuff sometimes. Like America actually is where the sponsors were fantastic. I had a guy here, Simon Webber, that linked me up with some sponsors in America. In America, if you're a pro, it's funny, it's pretty, I shouldn't say this, but they're like, oh, you're a pro triathlete? They really, and the sponsors just say, no, if you have the fastest swim leg over there, you can make good money just being a swimmer as a triathlete. And that's what I was able to do in the 70.3 events throughout America, more so than the prize money at the finish line. So I'd make a few grand. I mean, when I went to France in 2002, it was probably my best year. I'd made 10 grand in 8 weeks, right? But I had my job. And the other thing I did, unlike a lot of triathletes, for them, unfortunately, is, I'd be over there and I'd make sure, I always had that motto, I'd train hard, rest off, race hard, go out with the team, go out with my wife. Then we might go away for a couple of days and, check out the scenery. I spent plenty of time in the Czech Republic and Italy and Spain. And I made sure I saw the world. And some of these other athletes, unfortunately, that were full-time, they saw the insides of their hotel, generally speaking. And that's a little bit sad because I've had some really good experiences meeting so many people and rubbing shoulders with such a diverse range of people by competing overseas. And I think multidiscipline sport by nature allows you to come up and because I'm a swimmer, I'm a bike rider, I'm a runner, and I do a bit of core work too. And you meet so many people that rather than if you're just a runner or just a pool swimmer or, I think too the multidiscipline stuff, I would never have been a good individual. I'm glad triathlon was invented because it was definitely my cup of tea, whereas I was never going to be a swimmer or a bike rider. Definitely not a bike rider. Might have made it as a runner perhaps, but I was glad that triathlon came together.
Nice. Sorry, Paul, over to you, mate. 2
things he's going to cut us off first. Moving into after triathlon, mate, and how that transition was moving away from triathlon. I know you got into a bit of coaching, and I'd like to say that you've always been a guy that's very approachable and very free with his information. And, you've helped me out a few times over the years, and I think generally you've been very approachable. How did you find that transition, mate? Did you miss it? Do you still miss it?
I did miss competing. I did. I was coaching triathlon a little bit paid, but I got out of that. I've actually got back into surf lifesaving coaching and mentoring a lot of young surf Ironman guys and girls, and with a bit of success they've had. I'm not saying that's because of me, but that's been fairly rewarding. I still do that with Redhead Surf Club. And trying to impart a bit of knowledge back into that field. Yeah, I don't know. I still train every day and try and keep fit. I work with the Fiery still after 23 years now. But yeah, I just, I don't know. I mean, that's what I do every day. So I can have a few beers every arvo. I'll always swim or paddle or run or do something.
And mate, we wanted to give you the opportunity. You know, it's probably a couple of years ago now, but you've become an author as well. And
yes.
that's, you know, that's just an insight into who this guy is. You know, he's given back to the sport. He's given back to the community. Did you want to just give a quick background to the book, mate, and where it's come from?
Yeah. So I had kids. My kids are basically 11 and 8 now, but when they were probably 3, 4, 5, I was starting to read books to them, and I love reading. I read all the time, and my dad, he was like a full school teacher, and I was fairly sort of, you know, my parents were never pushy in sport. They were pushy more in the getting a good education and stuff like that. Anyway, I was reading stuff, and I thought, oh, there's a little bit of a gap or a dearth of information in regards to quality beach and surf education, I thought, for children. So I got together with Surf Life Saving Australia and wrote a couple of children's books, which I've done 2.
Awesome.
Oh, mate, unreal.
Yeah, and the second one I did, actually, all the money from it goes to a young girl I used to coach who was a surf iron woman, Jessica Collins. She's got a Jessica Collins Foundation. Unfortunately, Jess, 2018, had a spinal injury in a upper neck and is confined to a wheelchair. She's fighting hard and doing well, but yeah. So the books have sold well, actually. So done all right. And most authors apparently don't make any money. So anyway, that's
It's a great insight into who you are as a person, mate. And like to wrap it up, it's, you know, hats off to you for a great career. Always a super humble guy, super approachable. Always up for a beer at the beaches after a race, and we've had many good yarns over the years. So I just want to say a huge thank you, mate. And probably miss seeing you run around in the sluggos. And
yeah. Before we go, mate, I've got a couple of questions for you just on that. Drafting in triathlons, yes or no? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, well, I enjoy. I liked it.
Yes or no, mate? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, carbo loading before a race, yes or no?
Short course, no.
Beer after exercise, yes or no?
Always.
And sluggers in any event.
Oh,
yes
I love
or no?
it, mate. I love it. I came from the clubbies, so for me, it was always a go. And the only other thing I'd say that I probably wouldn't mind getting across tonight is I see some people come along and ask advice about, you know, they started swimming at 18 and their coach said they've got to watch this and fuck technique. You mate, some of those people coming through, you're never going to change it. It's one piece of advice I could give Pearl. I'd say you dealt with the genes you're given, make the most of them, get the arms over, get the legs over, and go for it.
Look, mate, can't thank you enough. Those words of wisdom right at the end there. Is there anything else we want to hear from you before we sign off for tonight, mate?
No, it's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot. And
thank you. And thanks always to all of our viewers and all of the people we've interviewed so far. It's a real joy and pleasure for Paul and I, and it's certainly something that we look forward to and want to do and want to keep doing. So thanks, everyone, and thanks Boyd, for tonight. Much appreciated, mate.
Thanks to the sponsors quickly too, but Battler,
don't forget our sponsors.
Bloody champion, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you, boys.